Let me say from the onset that I regard this as a Nigerian problem to be solved by Nigerians. Our problems have been complicated by foreigners who think they understand Nigerians or Africans better than we do ourselves.
Lagos, across the lagoon in the late afternoon sun, isn't a bad-looking city. Its troubles have been internal. Weakness and corruption in the federal government, which rules the 4 regions of Nigeria. That basically is why the troops are in, why public buildings in Lagos have been under military guard for the last few days, and why, at any rate for the moment, the government is in the hands of General Aguiyi-Ironsi, the army commander. The coup now begins to look more and more like a straightforward military revolt against corruption in government, and one that's likely to last. It has popular backing. What's not so clear is who its real backers are. The man at present being put forward is the army commander, General Aguiyi-Ironsi, who arrived at the heavily guarded parliament buildings to hold the new administration's first press conference.
The federal military government in Nigeria has taken over the administration of the country. Functions of the federal military government will be exercised by the Supreme Military Council, and details of which will be announced later. Permanent secretaries in charge of federal ministries will continue in their office, carrying out the normal functions of government, and they shall be directly responsible to the federal military government when constituted.
Will there be press censorship during this regime?
I do not think that I should start off with press censorship. But I may impose censorship if it became necessary.
John Digby of the Daily Mail in London, will there be any change in the external policy of your government?
No.
Television News of London. May I ask the General whether he regards his administration as a permanent or a caretaker administration?
My main concern is to restore law and order as soon as possible.
One of the 2 regional prime ministers who died was the Sardona of Sokoto from the mighty north. And a contributory cause of the rising was his intention to use the army not to crush corruption, but to crush protests against it. He chose a moment when the federal Prime Minister Balewa was busy with his Commonwealth Prime Ministers' Conference last week at the Federal Palace Hotel in Lagos. In the small hours of last Saturday morning, at the Ikoyi Hotel in Lagos, a colonel sent by the Sardona was shot in his hotel bedroom. The coup was on. Prime Minister Balewa was taken before dawn from his house beside the lagoon. Army officers took his finance minister from a nearby house, Festus Okote Ibo, who once increased the duty on imported shoes to protect his own shoe factories. The Lagos Museum was briefly the headquarters of the revolt. Already, as it turns out, it was more than a revolt. It was an organized takeover. Word went to Ibadan, capital of the western region, where the regional Prime Minister Akintola was shot with his wife in another bedroom fight. Kaduna, the northern capital, fell into the hands of a Major Nzegwu, who seemed to be a rebel. But when the army chiefs discarded the fiction that they were simply protecting the existing government, he was received into the fold. In Lagos, from all one gathers, the coup is cheerfully accepted, and the Sardona and Akintola are unlamented. Even Balewa's departure from office is likely to be more wept in London than in Lagos. As early as Sunday, the day after the coup, people pursued their ordinary diversions as if they still lived under one of the most stable governments in Africa. No one seemed distressed or puzzled. Perhaps they were right not to be. Perhaps it's all very simple. Gabriel Fagbore, a Lagos journalist, gave me his view of the takeover's real causes.
From my own point of view, corruption, nepotism on the part of politicians of all parties, and the danger of internal strife in Nigeria swept the army into power. Some of these soldiers, I believe, are much more intelligent and much more patriotic than the politicians, whom we all condemn.
But there has been a wave of this in West Africa in particular, Central African Republic, Dahomey, the Congo, all kinds of places. Why is this?
This is not peculiar to West Africa. You have them in South Africa, too, in South America, too. I mean, there had been coup in Asia, in Sudan, and also in Pakistan and Middle East.
No special reason, then, here in Africa?
Well, I can see no special reason, but there is something I say in this. Young elements in Africa are in a hurry as much as the continent. Most of these African countries are being ruled by men who belong to the old brigade, who are corrupt and who accept nepotism, corruption, injustice, greed, avarice as virtues. And some of us, I'm not a member of the army, mind you, but some progressive elements believe that this is not the age for corruption. People who go into public life must be prepared to serve for the glory of service.
What difference will it make if Balewa is found alive?
I would very much wish that he's found alive, very much so. But there is no doubt that his weakness in controlling his ministers is partially responsible for the present situation. Take the Western region situation, for example. His government refused to act, even though people are being killed daily and life and property are becoming unsafe. He refused to act.
So you wouldn't expect people to want him to get his old job back?
I wouldn't want him to get it back. And I know millions of Nigerians wouldn't. Because we want Nigeria to stay united, prosperous, and great.
Now General Ironsi is setting up his cabinet of soldiers and civil servants, perhaps even feeling his way in foreign affairs. The big question still unanswered, of course, is whether there's anyone behind Ironsi. Does he call the shots, or do we look for another?
From the information at my disposal, the cabinet decided to transfer power to him as the general officer commanding the armed forces. It means an abdication of power. And it means then the suspension of the president, the prime minister, the 4 regional governors, and the 4 regional premiers. In other words, the civilian authorities have found it impossible to maintain law and order and have transferred same to the military authorities until law and order can be maintained.
Are you or your cabinet setting a time limit on this assumption of power?
I'm not in position to say because I wasn't there. But the acting president, in a telephone conversation to me, merely mentioned that cabinet met and unanimously and voluntarily agreed to abdicate power. I'm assuming in the light of previous practice elsewhere in the world that it will be temporary.
But this military government could last 6 months or a year or even 2 years.
That's been the case in other parts of the world, and I won't rule that out.
Mr. President, do you think it was a coup or a mutiny?
From what we have read from what I have read in the papers or seen in the televisions, some say it's a coup, some say it's a mutiny. But I doubt if it's a coup on the evidence available, because a coup would imply an attempt to overthrow the legally constituted government. That evidence is yet to be forthcoming. But what we know is that
Some soldiers in some parts of the country are in control, and others are in control. Well, some people call one group rebels, they call others loyalists. Well, you can take your pick there. But so it might appear to be mutiny, but I wouldn't say that it's either a coup or a mutiny. What I would say is that there is a sort of insurrection, or there is disorder in Nigeria, which the civilian authorities find impossible to contain.
When the Nigerian cabinet met, the British High Commissioner was present. Is it likely that the Nigerians there asked for help, which hasn't yet been transmitted to this country and to yourself?
In the first place, the principle of inviting the head of a diplomatic mission to attend a cabinet meeting of a friendly nation can be criticized. But in view of the nature of emergency prevailing, maybe it can be excused in the circumstance. But Sir Francis Cumming Bruce himself was reported to have said that the cabinet did not ask for military assistance. That may be so, it may not be so. If it is so, I'm afraid it will be a bit awkward to Britain in view of the fact that the present government has refused to use force in Rhodesia.
Oh, so this isn't quite the same, is it?
Well, it is not exactly on all fours, but after having listened to Mr. Harold Wilson, when he rebutted the arguments of the Sierra Leone Prime Minister, Sir Albert Magai, last week in Lagos, he said, or he led me, and those who think like me, to believe that Britain could not have used force because of reasons of logistics. If, therefore, Britain cannot use force against his own colony, I don't see how Britain could be in position to render military assistance to a friendly government which asks for it. This is purely academic, of course, because the British government can always decide to do what they like. But I feel that since African states felt annoyed at the inability of the government to use force in Rhodesia for logistical reasons, it would be very embarrassing to the present government to do so in view of the fact that some African states had already broken relations from Britain on that reason.
Can I put it another way, Mr. President, that if the Nigerian cabinet or General Aguiyi-Ironsi invited British military troops to aid for this coup or mutiny, would this be acceptable to you?
If the cabinet did that, yes. If General Aguiyi-Ironsi did that, I'm not in position to say anything because he's in charge, he's in control, and he is in position to decide what to do in the circumstances. It's possible he had insufficient force or sufficient weapons, and like a soldier, he felt that's what he should do. But I've only pointed out the embarrassing situation to Britain in view of this delicate issue on Rhodesia. Some of us feel very strongly about it, and when we had the explanation given, well, we thought it might be the answer, logistics, but it's strange that a country as powerful as Britain is not in position to do so to a crown colony which enjoys internal self-government.
Let me say from the onset that I regard this as a Nigerian problem to be solved by Nigerians. Our experience over the last 2.5 years does not encourage us to believe that many of those who offer us their hands of friendship are actually friends, or that the advice we receive from so many quarters is honest and helpful. Our problems have been complicated by foreigners who think they understand Nigerians or Africans better than we do ourselves. So-called humanitarians have deliberately fanned the flames and helped to prolong the suffering of our people.